So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to our webinar on what corporations are saying about incentive travel. For the past couple of months, Site has been bringing you regular webinar content, and we've categorized that under three distinct formats or themes. So armchair conversations, destination reboot, and the business case for incentive travel. And today's webinar falls under that category. And it's sponsored by our great friends at Destination Canada and represented on today's conversation by Jennifer Adesal, Director, Incentive Travel at Destination Canada. Jennifer, you're very welcome.
Hi, Padraig. How are you?
Excellent. Great to have you back again, Jennifer. How's it going there?
It's going great. And, it's great to be back again and be part of such an important discussion with such an amazing panel that we have today. It feels like we were just here yesterday in the midst of COVID talking about this very topic. And what a year and how fast things have moved and how they're changing, all these moving parts. But it's also great to see that we have such an engaged community, and Site has been such a pillar in the incentive world by keeping all of us on our toes with such great research and industry intel. So bravo to Site.
Thanks very much. Before we actually jump into proceedings, can I draw attention to your title, Jennifer? It says Director Incentive Travel. Now, I don't think I've ever seen a DMO person with such a specific mandate in relation to our sector. I assume this is very intentional on the part of Destination Canada.
Yes, of course. And thanks for pointing that out. And yes, I believe we are the only national tourism organization that has a dedicated portfolio and team towards the actual incentive segment. We recognize that this is an exclusive segment that does require dedicated leadership, as there are a lot of moving parts, like I mentioned, but whether it's keeping up to date on emerging trends to working with our partners and stakeholders on new and exciting product. So us having this dedicated and focused team, we're not only able to expand our global market share through various multiple innovative business development activities, but we're also able to identify areas of opportunity that within Canada that align with growing or emerging trends and give it a little bit of love and care to get them to incentive ready. And I have to say, it's a fantastic and exciting portfolio.
Excellent. Well, we're delighted that it's you that's actually carrying that portfolio, Jennifer, and you're doing an amazing job so far. Today, we're going to present and discuss the results from edition number 2 of our ongoing research with US corporations. And to help with the discussion, joining Jennifer, we have Matt Coyne, president of Cantrav. So Matt, we're delighted to call out Cantrav's recent awards in respect of your wonderful work with Tahira, Site's head of events on Global Conference. And obviously, Global Conference took place in Vancouver immediately before the pandemic struck.
Thanks, Padraig. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for mentioning that. We're extremely proud of our work on the Global Conference, and I say our because it really was a team effort. And I would be remiss to recognize our destination partners in support of that event with Destination Vancouver and of course Destination Canada as well, and our host hotel, the JW Marriott Park Vancouver. But that was exciting for us. Maybe you can believe it. It was probably one of our last live events that we had an opportunity to host, and it was a time where we had an opportunity to try and tell a different story of Vancouver, to share our story in what was maybe traditionally not considered an incentive time. And so for us to have that opportunity and be able to welcome all our industry colleagues to Vancouver at that particular time was exciting for us. And again, just really proud of our collective work on delivering such a successful conference.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. We're also thrilled to have on the panel a great friend of so many of us in the industry, Kathy Roach, Director, Meeting Planning, Travel and Events for Western and Southern Financial Group. So Kathy, you've been busy recently with incentive programs, isn't that right?
I sure have, and hello everybody. I'm looking at all the time zones here and things as well too. I wish I had a fancy background like my Canadian friends. Porg, and you and I have been talking a lot of late. I work for a financial company out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and we have a CEO who is a huge believer in face-to-face meetings. We had the privilege of traveling this summer, June and July. We did 3 incentive conferences at the Broadmoor, and then followed up with that with a trip to Nevis in early August for a high-level producer conference. And we have another program that starts up on Monday of next week to the Dorado Beach in Puerto Rico. We've seen a slight drop, quite a bit of drop in attendance because we are mandating vaccines for all of our associates and our attendees. So we've seen probably 50% of our normal attendance at these conferences this year. So average groups for us are typically 450, in some cases 350, and we saw probably about 100 to 150 people. Our high-end incentive travel was a bit diminished as well, but everything has been successful. Our executives have come back and just raving. They were the first out of the gate, which I'm very pleased and proud of, to be in front of their producers, and we got some great feedback. So we are already booked, Porg, for 2022 at Palm Beach in Palm Beach, Florida, and St. Thomas for our incentive. And then we're booked for 2023 in Bermuda, and we're doing those back to back in Bermuda. So we are thrilled.
Fantastic. That's great news. Thanks for that. It leads us actually very nicely to our Corporate Insights report. So we asked Terry Mannion, who's the president of Site Foundation, and Site Foundation being the commissioner of the report, to unpack this all for us. We've taken his presentation then and edited it into 3 short videos, the first of which we'll now play, and follow that up then with a live discussion. And you can, as always, contribute questions through the Q&A facility. So don't be shy. Can we roll it there, Aoife?
Hello, everyone. I'm Terry Mannion, Site Foundation President for 2021, and I'm happy to be here to provide a small recap of the data that we're seeing from our 2nd edition of Corporate Insights. But first, I'd like to thank Accor and Abu Dhabi Tourism and Convention Bureau for their great support so that we could get Corporate Insights up and running last April. So in April of 2021, we went out to a database of planners of incentive travel programs and asked them 7 or 8 specific questions. We then returned to them recently in September and asked that same group those same questions with some minor tweaks so that we would get a consistent response and be able to track trends and see major changes or even minor changes. So today I'm here to give you a quick glimpse of what some of those changes were as the data came in. As you can see from this slide, we received responses from several different verticals that typically use incentive travel. The one thing I do want to point out is that in our 2nd round in September, we didn't get responses from everyone that we got in April. People on holidays being busy, it just didn't work quite as well as it did in April. And what happened there is we're skewed a little heavier towards the finance and insurance sector, and that perhaps may skew some of the results. There may be some more conservatism, there may be some more domestic, who knows? So it's pretty consistent with April, but we did want to point out that slight difference. In this slide, it's great to see that over the next 3 years, most of our respondents expect things to remain relatively the same in response to how many programs will be run in the next 3 years, how many incentive programs will be run. I think with the border restrictions, the lower vaccination rates in some countries, changing restrictions regularly, and just some of the lingering confusion as to where you can go and when that 3 years is going to start is where we're all we're waiting for that because we're still in the midst of COVID. So although they don't expect things to change over the next 3 years, we have seen those postponements, which are also indicated here and even more so in our next slide. Due to the lingering effects and restrictions, the number of those replacing 2021 programs with another incentive reward has grown slightly. When you compare that, however, to how many have permanently moved away from incentive travel, that's the good news. They've been forced to alter their incentive travel programs due to the Delta variant and other restrictions that we talked about previously, but they're not moving away long-term from incentive travel. That's the good news. Also, those committed to programs in 2022 has actually grown, and that's a very strong data point. So there is optimism out there. That light is still flickering at the end of the tunnel and getting brighter. The press may not make it look that way all the time, but the incentive travel planners are telling us it's still there and we are moving forward. In this slide, the more colorful the graph actually means there's been more postponements. And while that isn't a great thing, the overall results are still pretty good. When you analyze the data, 82% of our respondents expect to do a domestic meeting by the first quarter of 2022. 97% are expecting to do domestic meetings in 2022. For the balance of the categories, international meetings, 85% expect to run an international meeting in 2022. 100% expect to run a domestic incentive in 2022, and 92% expect to run an international incentive in 2022. So yes, recently we have had some cancellations, we have had some postponements. We can't get away from that reality, but the news is still trending positively. So let's cut through the clutter and understand that our industry is bouncing back.
So quite a lot to digest there. But can I start with Terry's final remarks, where he says news is still trending positively and the industry is bouncing back? I'm just wondering, is there a touch of the Pollyanna about that? Or is that what you're seeing too? Can I start with you, Jennifer?
Sure. Thanks, Padraig. Interesting results, I have to say. However, we're looking at your survey. What I'm seeing is, organizations are essentially replacing with more, which means they're committed to the travel rewards, but due to the variant, whatever that may be, rewards are being replaced. Again, only assuming that this is the direct correlation between attendee sentiment, maybe, and then the ongoing corporate restrictions within individual organizations. Now, I do see that incentives are still important to reward their earners. We see that from the results in your chart. And above all, everything of being, the travel component is being affected by all of those, all of the above. Now, what I wanted to share, though, is to what Terry mentioned, is we are also seeing movement from our friends in the UK and from the US who are actively sourcing. They're actively contracting incentive programs into Canada for 2022 and beyond. So we are seeing an uptake in RFPs from both our DMC partners and our DMO partners from across all borders. So I would agree with Terry that the industry is bouncing back, and I'm positive. I am positive as well.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Jen. Matt, what about you? Are the RFPs coming in again? And what about DMCs and, say, other destinations with whom you were in touch?
Right. Well, I'm pleased to say that indeed the RFPs are coming in, and I think for here in Canada, there was almost like a direct correlation when Canada reopened its borders on August 9th to welcome US visitors and September 7th to welcome international visitors. We definitely saw a sort of an uptick. And I would almost argue, more importantly, we saw the interest from actual physical site inspections. So I'm pleased to say, indeed, we're seeing those RFPs come in, site inspections as well. Speaking to some of my counterparts as well, they're seeing that same interest as well. But I think it really comes down to where each respective region is within their own sort of challenge and struggle with pandemic, and those destinations that may have done relatively well and have some real positive indicators, and they see that their reopening strategies are moving forward. I think you're seeing that correlation with interest for meetings. And so I think that there's just a clear indication that there's a pent-up demand. And so people are just looking at where they might be able to meet and where they might be able to do so safely for their guests and programs.
Very good. And finally, to Kathy, you've already given us a really positive statement regarding Western and Southern, but I know you're in contact with many other corporate professionals. So what are you hearing in your network about recovery?
Sure. Thanks, Borg. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues who were very optimistic and very positive for 2021 in particular, several folks and friends of mine in the industry had some international travel that was coming up by the end of the year. and those have been canceled. I think what I'm hearing from the industry and a lot of people, the biggest frustration for us as meeting planners is the vaccinations. And still a lot of our producers, and I'm talking about in the financial and insurance industry, a lot of our producers just are refusing to get vaccines. They don't want to do the COVID testing, or if they do, there's a lot of restrictions around that. So I think that's a big challenge for us. But a lot of colleagues in my industry who were traveling to Monaco and the Bahamas and places like that and things to have canceled, hoping to rebook in 2022 and beyond. I'm excited too to tell the Canadian friends as well. We are going to be looking at Canada in 2024 and hopefully 25 as well. We had to cancel a program to Victoria Island in 2020, so we did not rebook yet, but we're looking at that. But I would say that the biggest threat that we've got still right now is that vaccination and getting people out and getting them to feel comfortable and feel safer and things too, but a lot of cancellations and postponements.
Interesting. Thanks for that, Kathy. We'll move into the second part of the presentation. So we'll go back to Terry again, and let's hear what he has to share now.
If you look at the question of this slide in number 5, we asked that what changes that were the result of COVID-19 will continue to be important to the future success of their incentive travel programs. Despite all of the other distractions that COVID has brought, it's great to see that sustainability has still remained very high and grown from our April responses, which to me says that some of the other really focused COVID elements are drifting into the background a little bit, allowing sustainability focus to return to the heights it was before, and we expect that to continue to grow. The one that I think all of us will be very happy to see is there is a lessening. It's slight at this point, but it's decent on contract focus. We all know how focused we were in April and May of 2020. We were still there in April of 2021, even though less at that point than 2020, but it's starting to recede. So we feel we've got those contracts in a place that will work for all partnerships, and we'll just move forward with the things that really matter to our participants. This question was posed a little differently in September. We wanted to take a deeper dive into that 100% supportive comment that we got in April. That almost seemed too good to be true. So we dug a little bit deeper, and we did find out that there was a little bit of qualification around that. However, if you take the bars and put them together, that 100% is pretty well still there. It just, we added a depends line, and that may have given some easy outs for people to not specifically answer the question, but really the numbers that are still committed to incentive travel are well over 90%, which is great news. We asked our respondents to comment on, when selecting a destination, what criteria ranked the highest, and we wanted to see how that trend might change from April to September. While destination appeal as a general response did grow considerably, a number of things would factor in there. Destination appeal means so many different things now in COVID than it did before. What protocols are in place, what the destination is saying from a marketing point of view around COVID, and then generally just the appeal to your participants who are trying to qualify for the destination. So that has changed. But one that really jumped out at us was the MICE infrastructure. We really feel that this calls back to the relationships that we all have within the industry, that when we need to know something, we talk to each other. So the DMOs, the DMCs, knowledgeable people at properties that we use in a specific destination are who we're turning to get the straight goods on, okay, what's it like there really? You know, we don't want to be sold down a road that disappoints all of us. So we trust those people. We share those relationships within site, within the industry, and that's who we're calling on. So if we are assured that the MICE infrastructure is there to handle the group safely and provide the experience that we all expected in the past, with naturally some changes due to COVID, that's who we trust, and that's who we're turning to. It was heartwarming to see that, and that's a significant, almost double ranking, although it's still not way up there with everything else. It grew on a percentage basis more than any other.
So thanks to Terry for that. I know there's we're getting some comments in the boxes in relation to the illegibility of the slide, so we apologize for that. But just to actually explain, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to present a kind of a very high level presentation without kind of deep diving into the specifics yet. That will come with the white paper that will follow this particular study, and that's still being worked on at the moment. So we'll try and keep it kind of high level and not get too frustrated about the our difficulties in reading the slides. I want to focus on three topics that Terry calls out here. He talks about sustainability, contracts, and what we call MICE infrastructure. And what we mean by that is simply the presence in a destination of a great DMO, a wonderful DMC, brilliant hotel partners, maybe a local site chapter, or some form of mature business event community. So that's what we consider to be MICE infrastructure in a destination. And it is a criteria that is used often in the selection of a destination. So I'm going to start with Jennifer on sustainability, if that's okay. And our research is calling this out as being definitely on the rise. I'm actually the lucky recipient of a beautiful publication that Destination Canada produced entitled The Canadian Signature Incentive Experience Collection. And when I review the experiences available to qualifiers in Canada, I'm seeing sustainability written large over them all. So is sustainability then a key pillar in your outreach to incentive qualifiers, Jen?
Thanks, Padraig. And I just want to say, I love Terry. Terry is absolutely great. I love listening to him speak when he's presenting. So just a little shout out to Terry. And second, I'm really glad that you enjoyed the book. So for those of you, this is our book that we actually curated with a lot of our amazing, oh, it's kind of hard with the background, but a lot of our great partners have been curated into this beautiful collection. We put a lot of love into this collection, and I'm excited to say we're developing more experiences, working with our stakeholders to continuously grow our incentive product offering. And in regards to sustainability, I mean, we're extremely cognizant that this is an emerging, I don't want to say emerging, but it's an emerging focus for all things business events related. And it's such an important and pressing topic. We're fortunate due to the vast geographical mass of our country, as well as all of the experiences, that we're able to align our inventory with this topic, with sustainability. We have partners who have developed citywide strategies of sustainability, like our friends in St. John's, Newfoundland, with their Healthy City initiative. They adopt best practices in the community and then relate this back to the business events pillar and incentives, et cetera. We also have our friends out in Niagara who have implemented a tree planting program that's a pillar for their APAC incentive audience that comes through, because they want to do something, they want to give back to the community. So they've actually incorporated this within their strategy. But I also wanted to highlight how cultural and socioeconomic sustainability is also being incorporated into our incentive offering. For example, our Indigenous partners who bring you into their communities and they teach you how to traditionally cook with traditional ingredients. They show you, how, for example, how they build canoes, how they trap, or they teach you their language. And these are all important components for sustainability within their community to keep their culture and their traditions alive. So going back to the destination appeal, I think that is I know that this is one of the many things that Canada scores highly on the destination appeal, and why we're able to offer such diversity in the programming, because I do believe strongly that the future of programming will come down to destinations or partners or stakeholders that understand what the destinations are doing around this topic, what they're saying around this issue, and then of course how they're addressing this important topic as well. So.
Well, thanks for that, Jen. When it comes to sustainability and CSR stories, I know, Matt, that you've got lots of great examples in those fields. We actually experienced them during the Site Global Conference, and it was amazing. But sadly, I'm not going to ask you to comment on that. We're going to go to a much drier topic for you, sorry. But somebody's got to do it. So I want to ask you about contracts. So the pandemic did cause pandemonium as regards contracts, didn't it?
It did, and thanks, Pork. Appreciate you giving me this exciting topic to speak about in the backdrop of all the other wonderful sustainability initiatives that we could be speaking about. But really do appreciate it. But I also appreciate the importance of it as well. So with that, indeed, the pandemic really disrupted our industry around the kind of the contracting and so forth. And obviously during the pandemic, I'm sure all of my industry colleagues, regardless of kind of where you sit in our ecosystem, was dealing with the cancellations, dealing with postponements, trying to move from one year to another, or another even season to another. And so there was so much focus on that, and contracts for new opportunities almost came to a standstill because everyone was so focused in the immediate and in the now. And fortunately, we're seeing that change. We're absolutely seeing some willingness to sign contracts in the future. The near term, for sure, there's still some hesitancy in the industry, from what I'm feeling, and it's probably twofold. It's one where it's just this notion of, will we actually be able to meet? And so that degree of uncertainty around whether or not perhaps a regional or mandated sort of restriction on gatherings or what have you would actually prevent the opportunity for moving forward and the program for actually coming to fruition. I think second to that, around this near-term hesitancy, is this notion of trying to really understand what the risks are from a financial standpoint. And I'm not suggesting that we all wouldn't really understand what our cancellation policies are, what kind of penalties may or may not be in place, or whether non-recoverable or recoverable costs are associated with that. And so I think what we're seeing for the dynamics are really different for these near term, where clients are really trying to understand exactly what those costs are. And so we're finding that we really need to break out and really do the forensics and line item almost what would be considered potentially refundable, and what are the small areas that might not be recoverable under the circumstances. I've had some instances as well where clients are willing to sign contracts, but absolutely there needs to be some clauses in place referencing around COVID and some of the impact that the COVID might have, or the pandemic might have. And again, this notion of whether or not some regional restrictions might actually impact it. It's not now necessarily travel and entering into the country. It's again, what are the localized restrictions? And so if those aren't in place, and that trickles down again to the entire supplier ecosystem, where I'm now not able to sign supplier contracts unless there's also, call it, some exit clauses in there, recognizing the uncertainty that we are. And that's that strange sort of tug of war of you're trying to develop some certainty with a contract in a very uncertain time still. But again, it's the go forward, the midterm, call it the Q2 of 2022. It seems as though we're almost sort of moving back to where, dare I even use the word normal, where we kind of just have that normal sort of pattern of contracting and that normal dialogue. But again, it's that sort of Q4 2021 and Q1 2022 where we're seeing a little more of that hypersensitivity and the concentration of, okay, what does this really mean for our organization? Recognizing that we do want to meet our full intentions there, but we potentially might not because of some implications in and around the pandemic that still exist.
Matt, thanks for that. That's a very comprehensive but extremely helpful response to such an important topic at this particular point. The final point then that Terry highlighted, and I want to address it now, is MICE infrastructure and that reliance that we have on great DMOs, DMCs, and the hotel leadership, because it's increased undoubtedly as a result of COVID. So Kathy, you're a corporate buyer and you rely on destination players to support your program delivery. So has your reliance on great partners increased as a result of the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. We're very good about partnering, and especially internationally, as you all know, in Canada, across Europe, and things as well. But our domestic partners are becoming even more important than they ever did before. I have two amazing senior planners who are getting ready to go down to Florida. Not that that's not a great destination, but domestically, and they are sourcing 5 or 6 different DMCs because there's so much great competition across the United States right now. So we're looking at a lot of our partners who may be based in the West Coast, but are also opening offices. Sterina is a good example. Access, some of our major DMCs that we partner with in many other destinations are starting to build on that East Coast or in the Midwest. So absolutely, they're becoming more and more critical to our success. We meet with them. We try to source as many of them as we can. And for us, it's not just about cost, but it's about, we talk about the sustainability for programs, but also the creativity, the uniqueness, and how our programs all fall together. So absolutely, much, much more important than ever before.
Excellent. And that's very consoling to hear, particularly to the DMC community and all of those destinations, both in the United States and in other locations where you've placed the business. We're going to move on to the final piece of the presentation. And this stems from questions that our corporate partners, so those who actually took the survey, we asked them in the first edition of the survey to highlight some questions that they would like asked in future editions, mainly about what other corporations were doing in terms of COVID and the precautions around COVID and so on. So let's hear from Terry on how our partners replied then to those questions.
The previous slides that I reviewed were comparing questions that we offered in April and then offered again in September. Our panelists and respondents asked that we add a couple of questions to the September survey, so we did that. One of those was on a scale of 1 to 10, what are those very important considerations? There were 9 different options to select from. On the screen right now, you'll see the top 5. What we've noticed is the top 4 are really things that are out of a planner's control. These are typically, we're subject to local and federal regulations, but we have to understand them, and that's why they're very important. We really can't change them, but we do need to be aware so that we follow the guidelines. The 5th one is a bit of an outlier in that each destination, each event planner can add their own responses around what kind of testing they'll do on site. Some perhaps for profit, others just being extra safe. But that ranks 5th now, which is probably lower than it might have been in the past. This too is one of the added questions that was added in September, and where we asked what policies your company have in place regarding vaccines, testing, safety protocols, etc. The 2 highest numbers and the key callouts were that 45% at the time of the survey were requesting that all travelers be vaccinated. Roughly 55% were going with whatever the local protocols were in the destination of choice. This too shows that things are swinging constantly. An example of that is France recently changing their requirements. 2 weeks ago, if you were from the US or Israel, you were on the green list of countries heading into France. As of last Friday or Saturday, you're now on the orange list and thus require vaccinations. Where prior to that, it was just a COVID test prior to travel or a antibody test. So you really have to keep track of what's going on in the destination you're heading to. Don't make any assumptions. Keep checking with those local experts, our DMOs, DMCs, and whatever contacts you have in the destination. Rely on those relationships you've made with site and throughout the industry, and stay on top of it. But we expect these numbers to change daily, but this is where we were as early as a couple of weeks ago when we surveyed everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all soon.
So thanks again to Terry for taking time out to prepare that presentation for us. We will be making the content available obviously after the webinar. But I'm going to start with you, Matt, by asking how Cantrav has been dealing with COVID, both internally within your own organization and then externally with clients.
Well, you're just really giving me the fun and exciting questions now. Aren't you? Contracts now, protocols and COVID regulations. Thanks, but again, not underlining the importance of this topic, especially as we look to try and now meet in person collectively as an industry and really address some of the issues in order for us to not only do it, but then how do we ensure that this is a sustainable effort and we don't retract again, or we don't contract, and we can continue to meet safely. So please, I'm proud to say that I was one of a number of industry colleagues here in British Columbia that formed a working group to develop best practices and guidelines to support our industry's restart and to restart it safely. We're able to share that obviously kind of across our country, but I think even throughout Canada, other regions develop their own best practices around that as well. But specifically here in British Columbia, our guidelines were used to help inform our provincial government around not only what our industry is, and one of the first things that we absolutely tried to communicate is that clear and distinct differentiation between a social gathering and a corporate meeting or a corporate event. One where we can control the intensity of social interaction. We can control flow of movement. We can control the overall agenda, and even specifically even the alcohol consumption as well. So these are all variables that absolutely differentiate between a social gathering, and inherently should be treated differently, especially given that the notion of meetings and in-person collaboration is really call it the economic strategy that we all should be using in order to move beyond this pandemic. And so in doing so, Cantrav obviously has been very mindful of the protocols, and we as event planners, we really become kind of the custodians or the stewards of the overall safety for our programs and our welcoming guests that are coming into our regions to meet. And so with that, here in British Columbia, for us, there's always that initial risk assessment in developing a COVID safety plan, and that is one of our best practices that we do. And of course, depending on size and scope, we might even name a safety officer that's purely responsible for monitoring those guidelines, ensuring that we've got the most appropriate guidelines and protocols in place to ensure that we are meeting safely, and more importantly, to offer some comfort to our guests, recognizing that although they might be there in person, everybody's comfort level might be a little different. And so for us, that really is paramount. Communication is key. And as event organizers, not only do we need to have that pre-event communication around what are the expected protocols, what are the expected sort of behaviors, but also during, and I think critically important, and what's probably may be lost, is that post-event communication, where you can communicate whether or not there even was a close contact, or even whether there was a positive case reported. Because again, if we take that more holistic approach, where we can really think about kind of the pre, during, and post-event, and understand and manage that post-event interaction as well, and ensuring that if there's a proper protocols in place, whether it be self-monitoring or some self-isolation around that. So that, for me, that's really the important piece there. the one of the things, and kind of Kathy mentioned it a little bit around this notion of vaccination, and Terry talked about sort of the MICE infrastructure. And while I appreciate vaccinations is a large kind of topic for Canada, essentially, if you want to arrive into Canada without actually having to quarantine, you need to demonstrate that you're a proof of vaccine and doubly vaccinated, depending on what you have. So therein lies some degree of comfort, and therein lies some degree of measure of mitigation or risk mitigation for kind of transmission and some, probably some serious implications. And when we talk about the infrastructure, one of the things that we're doing is we've established the infrastructure to provide on-site testing for delegates in advance of their departure. So it's one of those things where we can actually develop and bring in a satellite testing center inside your host venue, host hotel, so we can help reduce that barrier, that what might be perceived as a barrier in terms of, oh, we've got to take our, a test to get in, and then we've got to take a test to get out, or more importantly, you have to have a test to demonstrate your return to your country as well. And so again, for us, it is that infrastructure that we're trying to establish, and how do we help reduce those barriers in order for us to encourage meeting and that we can see our industry move forward and beyond this pandemic.
Again, Matt, thanks again. Just a tremendously kind of comprehensive response, and certainly, I think, setting out exactly the steps that need to be taken to get us where we need to be. Obviously, massive apologies to everybody who's part of this wonderful webinar. We've obviously been hacked, so apologies for that. I'm not sure how it happened. We'll investigate afterwards, but sorry about that. We'll go to you now, Kathy, if it's okay. Terry highlighted how about 55% of corporations are aligning their requirements with the requirements of the host destination, while about 45% are mandating vaccinations for qualifiers. What's the situation at Southern Western?
Western Southern, we're the railroad. We get called a little bit of everything, so no worries. As I mentioned earlier, we are mandating vaccinations. In fact, our company, we've been back in the office now for months, and we just received, which I haven't heard of any other company that's doing this, we just received $1,000 bonus from our CEO for being vaccinated. So it's a nice perk for people. I think we are, for my company in particular, I think we are 70-30, 70% vaccinated, 30 not. We know there are a lot of people for many medical reasons and things as well too that cannot physically get the vaccine, but we are definitely mandating vaccinations. We all carry our vaccination cards and things as well too. That doesn't mean that we're not paying close attention though to what's happening. So in Colorado Springs, for instance, at the Broadmoor, we worked very closely with our legal, our HR, and we had our medical doctor travel with us. And things as well too. So together we worked to ensure that those three conferences and incentive trips. Nevis was another challenge. Nevis required a little bit more than some of the other destinations. And then Puerto Rico, same thing. So we are mandating vaccines, but we are being very cognizant about what our hoteliers and our destinations are offering as well. So a little bit of both there.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. And again, I think just a very, very strong signal of leadership on the part of your own organization, right. Where on the one hand, there's obviously a 100% belief in the value of an incentive travel experience and the value of an in-person experience, and then 100% belief in making sure that when those experiences happen, that they happen in a way that's safe for all. And I think obviously the vaccine was it was the thing that we hoped and prayed for from the very beginning. And now that we have it, I think it's incumbent on us all to, unless for health reasons it's not possible for us, but I think it's incumbent on us all to go out and get it and get our travel industry back where it needs to be. So thanks for that, Kathy. I can't believe it, but once again, the time has caught up with us and we need to wrap up. There are some questions which I will come to, but I do want to thank Terry president of the Site Foundation, for taking us through the deck. We will be publishing the deck and a second white paper over the next couple of weeks, so stand by for that. Huge thanks to Matt from Cantrav, and obviously to Kathy from the financial sector. It's so good to have somebody who's an actual corporation. You add so much by way of real kind of input. So thanks so much for that. And back over to Jennifer. We usually have a giveaway. I forgot to actually highlight that at the very beginning, but we are continuing our tradition. And we do have a question for you. Now, apparently the question is a very hard question, because I actually kind of threw it out there, and it was suggested this might be too hard. I don't think it's too hard. Now, maybe it's just the era I'm from, but can you stick up the question there, Aoife? So, lyrics from a song. On the back of a cartoon coaster in the blue TV screen light, I drew a map of Canada. Oh, Canada, with your face sketched on it twice. From a very famous song by a very famous Canadian singer-songwriter. And the final clue I'll give is she's female. So if you put up Jennifer's email address, the first 5 people that email Jennifer will get a copy of that magnificent publication that I mentioned earlier on. And believe me, no matter where you're from in the world, you're going to want a copy of this publication. It's just one of the most wonderful, I don't want to use the word coffee table, but now I've done it. So it's like a coffee table presentation of all of the wonderful experiences that you can do from an incentive qualifier perspective around Canada, but presented just in a beautiful way. So Jennifer, are you getting any responses yet? Or am I completely off kilter in my understanding that people would actually know who wrote those immortal lyrics?
I think it'd be great if you sang it part.
I
would. For the audience, maybe that will help.
I would sing it willingly if I had my guitar, and unfortunately, I'm not in a position where I can actually reach down and get my guitar. But look, actually, I'm just looking at the length of the email, so we'll give people a chance to kind of to take it down.
Just yet.
And in the meantime, Jennifer, can you actually hold up the book again?
Oh, I've got 3. 3 have come in, and 2 are right. Good. 2 are right. Oh.
Actually, there's a big heart which is kind of coming all the way from Canada to everybody who's listening. And there's 3 answers in already, is there?
There's 3 answers. 2 are right. Yep, I've got 3 so far. Oh, another one's come through. I've got 3, so I've got 2 more to give away.
Very good, very good. I'm going to take a couple of questions. I'll answer the first one myself because I happen to know the answer to it. Could I please ask, is this a survey of US only based buyers and bookers? And the answer is yes. We have a panel of about 100 US corporations that have agreed to answer this particular survey. It's a serial survey. So we did it in April. We surveyed the same demographic in September, and there will be a final one then coming at the end of the year. We are seeing a difference. We can't lie about that. There was boundless optimism in April, which was wonderful to see. And then Delta came to town, and that sentiment kind of weakened a little bit. So certainly that's evident in what Terry already presented. But it is US only, and the decision was made by Site Foundation to base it only on US, on the basis that there's a kind of a bellwether reality about what happens amongst US corporations. They really are leading in terms of the use of incentive travel as part of a reward and recognition program. So we figured if we can actually build up a solid kind of demographic that we can provide data from, it will kind of ultimately be applicable all over the world. Kim Bradford wants to know about the current requirements to enter Canada and so on. I'm not going to ask that now, but I know, Jennifer, I can connect you with Kim, and you can jump in there. Dave Gaisley let us know that it was Joni Mitchell. Dave, if you didn't know the answer to that, I would be suggesting that he would be fired, Jennifer. Would not be a fair thing to say?
And he's Canadian. He can't get a book. No, it's just
Exactly. But Dave, of course you're right.
Yes, it's Joni
Those
Mitchell.
lyrics are the immortal words of Joni Mitchell from one of the most beautiful songs ever written, called A Case of You. Kim also got it right. So fair play to Kim. And I just go into the chat and see, other than our hacked kind of text, is there anything that I need to ask anybody? Kathy, they're telling you, Kathy Roach, love you. So passing on that to you, Kathy. Hello from Ireland. Hello
Thank
from
you.
Indianapolis. Lots of people kind of jumping in. And howdy from Dallas, from Halifax, Chicago, Minneapolis, Sri Lanka, Huntington Beach, Southern California, Montreal, Casablanca, Cabo in Mexico, Massachusetts. These are some of the people that have been on this call today. So wherever you are, in whatever part of the world, thank you so, so much for being part of this really, really great presentation. And once again, to Kathy, to Jennifer, and to Matt, big, big thanks for your really wonderful input here. And we look forward to seeing you all very soon for our next site webinar. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.